You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And welcome to Soccer Today. I'm Duane Rollins along with Kevin Laramee. For our American listeners, we're going to get to the USA-Costa Rica disaster, I guess we'll call it, in the second half of the show along with some MLS news. But to start the show, we're going to go a little bit more Canadian, a little bit north of the 49th. And we have Len Vickery on the line, who is the head coach of the University of Alberta Golden Bears, who are the national it's called U Sports now, but I'm going to call them CIS sometimes in this interview. I just know I am the national university champions at anyway. How you doing, Coach? Congratulations.
Oh, I'm good, and thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
Len, let's just start with that for the listeners out there. If you could just give us a synopsis of how you captured the national championship. Just give us a brief little summary of what your season looked like and how you ended up capturing the championship.
Well, like most university college programs, we started off in the middle of August with training camp. This year we were afforded through Canada West game schedule, and following that 16-game schedule, those teams that made the playoffs, there were quarterfinals, must-win games to arrive at a Final Four. So that was within region, and most of the other regions do something similar. Teams across the nation come together for the national championship. 3 games in Guelph, Ontario, and came away as winners.
And how did the final? Tell us about the final. You won 1-0. Give us a little bit of a synopsis of that game.
Well, obviously a very close game, as most championship finals are. We're playing a very experienced team from UQAM, which is University of Quebec at Montreal. They have a lot of foreign students in their lineup, many that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. So they were coming to the end of their careers, or 5-year of eligibility. So very experienced, and it was a super effort on our part to overcome them, sneak a goal, and win the game 1-0.
Tell us a bit about your team. What were some of your key players, key performers throughout the run to the national championship?
Well, I think this year we had an exceptional recruiting group come into the team. We had some very strong holdovers from previous years, not too many in the 4th or 5th year. So we were very young, and for the most part, we were playing as many as 5 first-year players, or certainly first-year players in the program throughout the season. Typical of most university college seasons, you run into the injury bug, but even with the loss of some key players, we're able to have players come off the bench and produce for us, and we managed to keep it going, winning 13 of those 16 games through the regular season, and it was what catapulted us to the playoffs and to the national championships.
When you're looking at the state of university soccer in Canada right now, Len, do you see a difference over the last 2 years, Coach, with the advent of USL and other development pathways for players? Do you see a change in the type or profile of player that you can recruit for University of Alberta?
Well, It's good news and bad news. The good news is there's so many good young players that seek the pathway, not so much to a professional career in soccer, but to the professions. These people go on perhaps to be engineers, doctors, lawyers, teachers. Most significantly, they become the leaders within the soccer communities where they go. The bad news is if there were further professional opportunities, some of these players would surely gravitate to those teams and perhaps enjoy the opportunity to have a bit of a soccer career in those critical age groups from 18 to 25 and beyond.
Where I'm going with this question, Coach, is you heard probably this week the hire of Paul Byrne for the potential Canadian Premier League, which would be a professional soccer league in Canada that would give an opportunity for university players to go play in. And how do you feel about a U Sports draft for the CPL eventually?
Well, if the new professional league is looking to be primarily Canadian, a lot of these players will come from the university college programs, as they did back in the day when they had the old Canadian Soccer League. I remember back at that time, we had as many as 12 players, if not playing for the Edmonton Brickmen, they were playing in Calgary, Winnipeg, and even as far across the nation as there was a team back in the day in Nova Scotia. So I would see a lot of these players gravitating or taking the opportunity to play at the elevated level.
Lenny, you've been in Canada at the University of Alberta since 1985, which was a very good year for Canadian soccer, the year they qualified for their one and only World Cup, of course, the Mexico 86. Where do you see the state of the game right now in 2016 compared to the early years when you were in this country?
Well, of course, I have to talk to the old-timers, whether it's Bruce Wilson or Bob Lenarduzzi. They were the benefactors, perhaps, of having an opportunity to play, rub shoulders with some of the world's best in the old North American Soccer League. Things are different today. We have, of course, the professional clubs in places such as Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Ottawa. But because they're North American and not solely or intended for primarily Canadian players, there's not such an opportunity for those young aspiring Canadian players. They still have to go abroad, perhaps. So I would see a new professional league offering up that opportunity for a few more, certainly a few more Canadian players having a career in soccer.
I think that a lot of Canadians, we tend to hate ourselves sometimes, to put it bluntly. We tend to not necessarily look at Canadian institutions and think that they may be on par with the rest of the world, and that's unfortunate. And you see it particularly in the soccer world. And you've mentioned a couple times in this interview that CIS players, U Sport players, would be able to go on and fill the rosters of a Canadian Premier League teams, of Canadian Premier League teams. Can you please just give us a little bit of what your perspective is on the overall quality level of the top university programs in this country right now?
Well, it's night and day. And of course, I started a long time ago. Back in '85, we were going to get a foothold and develop programs. And primarily, back in the day, they were full-length programs. They started in September. They were concluded by the time winter came around in November. With the advent of indoor facilities, additional funding, and so on and so forth, many of the top programs are year-round. For example, you look in Quebec, Once their fall is concluded and they play outdoor, because of the addition of full-size indoor facilities, they play 11 versus 11 through the winter months. And that is the trend going right across Canada nowadays.
I'm curious to get your opinion, Coach. We have a great moment for Canadian soccer happening next Tuesday and the following Wednesday with the Montreal and Toronto Eastern Conference Final. What's your thought on the success that MLS team in Canada have had this year, from your perspective in University of Alberta?
Well, those are two very exciting teams, and obviously working their way toward the top of MLS. I will certainly be tuning into those games because they're of such a high quality. I'd like to think that that's the kind of impetus that we need to keep soccer developing in this country, so that we have more teams, and perhaps with the new Canadian Pro League, this will just add to the landscape of soccer in Canada, where there still remains a big void in terms of opportunity for those 18 to 23-year-olds.
There's a professional team in your backyard, close to the University of, they play right there. So can you describe what your relationship is with, if any, with FC Edmonton?
Well, of course, we had to build a very strong relationship. We know the coaching staff very, very well, and they have been very supportive of our program. There's been a big difference through the financial contributions of the brothers Fath. They've developed a small academy with FC Edmonton. They're certainly drawing the better players in Northern Alberta to that academy. That academy is fully funded by Tom Fath. And whereas most other academy programs are paid for by the players and the parents, this is fully funded, and they're starting to see some success with players being identified for the various national teams. And we're a huge benefactor because a number of our players, as many as 6 or 7, are coming from the FC Edmonton Academy. And something similar you would see going on in Vancouver, UBC being on the doorstep of the Vancouver Whitecaps. A number of players who spend time in their residency program gravitate to the UBC. And in York, I'm sure a lot of the TFC Academy players gravitate to York, perhaps Toronto, as those professional playing opportunities become a little bit more scarce, and they choose to pursue another profession.
Yeah, I'm in the GTA area. I can tell you that even Ryerson is beginning to benefit from some of that overflow from there. And of course, you have the League One Ontario program at the semi-pro level that's helping promote that as well. I do have a question from a listener here, and we often get this when we're talking about Canadian university sport. And it's hard to really answer in an easy way because there's differences in how university sport is governed in Canada versus the United States. But can you sort of give your understanding of where you think CIS sport fits with the NCAA, or where you'd fit in that kind of pyramid skill-wise?
Well, in terms of skill-wise, I think some of the top teams in Canada, I believe we've got close to 50 teams across the nation, whereas, of course, in the U.S., the NCAA, we're talking thousands. But certainly some of the top teams, whether it be a UBC or you mentioned Ryerson, Toronto, and some other notables across Canada, they would perhaps compete with some of the stronger teams in the NCAA.
All right, fair enough. Let me congratulate you once again. 30 years on the job, national championship. You're going to keep doing it for a few more years?
Well, that's the main talking point now. I've got the benefit of a couple of great young coaches, Kurt Bosch and Martin Anderson. More and more, we're going to have to allow these young fellas to get more involved in the coaching, making the decisions, and eventually taking over the program.
All right, we congratulate you again on a national championship, and good luck moving forward. Hopefully some of those players that you're coaching right now will get a chance in the near future to continue their professional career in the Canadian Premier League. Thanks again, man.
Okay, and thank you very much.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back. Look, I'm the CIS. I'm going to call it the CIS.
You sports.
Oh, I hate that name so much. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I guess I'm not millennial enough. Yes. Anyway, look, there's Rycroft and I back in the football days used to have had this conversation a few times about the possibility of getting the MLS to open up its draft to Canadian university sports athletes, and we even had an MLS representative on there. I forget exactly who it was. It's a pretty high-ranking one, at any rate, if memory serves. Forgive me, there's been so many interviews, so many years, but nonetheless, at that time, they sort of rejected it outright and sort of implied that maybe it wasn't worthwhile. It's always been an element of curiosity for me about where CIS would fit in with the NCAA. Len seems to think that the top programs would be able to play competitive games with the top programs down there. And I'll tell you, before you sort of dismiss that out of hand, you see in other sports, basketball, which is a sport that you think of that there's no way the Canadian teams could possibly, compete well. You look at the top programs like Carleton go down pretty much every year and win games against mid-majors, and even in some cases against teams or the club teams that you would think of as major players in NCAA basketball. Wisconsin, as I said on another show a few weeks ago, just lost to Carleton in basketball. In volleyball, you see it all the time. So it's not that big of a stretch to suggest that University of Alberta could go down and compete with Stanford or something along those lines. So
no, exactly. Even to the level of the Rouge et Or and Western Montréal in football and Thunderbirds UBC, the level they're playing, actually, if you're looking at the quarterback from UBC, he was touted as one of the maybe few Canadians to actually be drafted by the NFL. So there is possibilities there, and it would be interesting to see the CPL have a draft in U Sports, in the CIS draft, because you need Canadian players, and you have a big Canadian player pool coming out of those 50 or so university soccer programs.
Yeah, the other side of it is, on some levels, the agents particularly would rather those players come out without having their MLS rights sort of pegged, and the Canadian Premier League rights would be the same way. And we don't know exactly how allocation of players is going to work in the Canadian Premier League yet. It's one of those great mysteries that still is out there that none of us have been able to pin down exactly. So we'll wait and see, but you would absolutely think that the CIS would be a pretty solid place to get some of your depth players in those early years to come out and play. And again, like I said this before, I stress it one more time that about 50% of the roster is going to be Canadian. That means 50% won't be. So that's not the only place you can get players. So there will be foreign players coming in, and that's beneficial to the league. All right, let's move on. Kevin, we have a game that's started and it's going to happen in 6 days now.
It's coming soon now. It's coming.
So you and I, we're the enemy now. So we have to have some conversations that play that up. So I thought we'd have a little feature for the rest of this week and for Monday next week where we would debate. We got to figure Tuesday's show out because I'll be on the road Tuesday. We'll do it on the phone maybe. Anyway, so where we have a debate about certain aspects between the greatest city in the world and the Montreal. So, yeah.
Exactly.
So I thought we'd start with this one, Kevin. I thought we'd start with debating what the better sports city is, whether it's the greatest city in the world or Montreal. You go first. Why is Montreal a better sports city than Toronto?
It's tough to say because we lost the Expos and, well, our CFL team is relevant.
What? Who?
Well, yes. So there's that. In the world of soccer, if you're looking at Montreal over the years, you do have a history of the game at the highest level in this country and in North America, coming close up until 1992 with the SC Supra, and even way before that with the Montreal Manic in the NASL, and as well the Olympic of Montreal before that. It's a city of soccer dating 6 decades. So you do have a lot of history at the top flight here in Montreal. And if you're looking at all the records of Montreal in MLS, it's all records that Toronto had the opportunity to achieve and couldn't get there before somebody else.
Okay, well, yeah, but if the Impact aren't in MLS, if Toronto isn't in MLS first, I mean, this is ultimately where I always come down to this when people are trying to talk about, blah, 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 made playoffs first, blah, 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 one playoff game first. Yeah, you don't exist without TFC. I'm sorry.
Oh, but TFC doesn't exist if Montreal hasn't successful in the lower leagues before that.
It's MLS's money. Yeah, we bought.
Yeah, but MLSC had no interest in soccer until they saw that it was viable to have a profitable soccer team.
Well, maybe I don't know. I think what they wanted was a stadium, and they got the stadium from the deal. I don't know if Montreal played much of a role. And Toronto has a history of soccer. I've said this many, many, many times before. Toronto has had a professional soccer team in the city every year consecutively since 1961. That's the longest in the country. That is longer than Vancouver because the Whitecaps did have a year where they didn't exist between the 86ers and the Whitecaps, all the rebrand in that area there. So we're not talking about Vancouver. They're not even in this conversation right now, clearly.
No, they haven't made the playoffs, so they could go continue what they're doing right now.
Yes, exactly. Although
So the players actually play well for Costa Rica, though.
Yes, exactly. So we'll get that in the next segment. But in terms of the actual soccer history, look, I think that the greatest argument for Toronto as the best soccer city in the country is that they survived the Lynx and TFC up until 2 years ago. Any city that can maintain the 20,000 plus crowds after years of the Toronto Lynx incompetence and years of TFC incompetence has obviously the best soccer culture in the country. You survived.
Yeah. The 20,000 weren't constant, though. Like, if you look at that up until 2 years ago, it wasn't 20,000 anymore. Very less.
Still a hell of a lot more than they deserved.
No, well, yes, that's fair. Like, any amount was more than they deserved. But no, it is interesting. But if you look, fine, like you talk about Montreal, a sports city, we lost the Expos. But it took a decade of very, very ungodly managing of that team to finally kill it. And even up until this day, the Expos are one of the top 10 loved team in the league, even though they don't exist. So that's always there. You have, obviously, we don't have to talk about hockey because, well, two biggest city probably in the hockey in the world. And one of them is successful. The other one is profitable.
Well, one of them was successful.
One of them is the best team in the league right now as well.
They have a goalkeeper.
It's the best ever.
Yeah, we'll see. Bubble wrap Carey Price. That's all I got to say on that front there.
Well, hey, whatever works.
God love Habs fans. They're kind of like people used to make fun of Leafs fans for being like.
No, people still make fun of Leafs fans.
Well, exactly. But you know what? Habs fans have become Leafs fans. You celebrate first round playoff victories with riot.
Whoa. Last time we were in the final of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it's the last. Anyway, you celebrate beyond the championship. You haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1992. The last
93, 92, 93.
Pardon me. Sorry, the last professional championship in Canada. You know what city won the last professional championship in Canada? Toronto. The Blue Jays. It came after the Habs victory by a few months. It was in October versus.
The Impact won 2000.
The what? No, the Impact won a Division II championship. I'm talking about the highest level of division. Look, that Montreal is a great one-off sports town. You've got the F1, and you support it wonderfully. You've got, things like the CCL final when 60,000 showed up. 60,000 are going to show up to watch Toronto play on Tuesday. You've got lots of
60,000 are going to show up to see the Impact. A few thousand are going to show up to see Toronto.
They're also there to watch Toronto. They're all Javinko fans, I've heard. Anyway.
Yeah, well, fine.
Exactly. So and what we all know is that obviously we're all better than Vancouver. That's we can agree on that one, right?
Well, it's not even a challenge. What has Vancouver done?
What has Vancouver done lately?
Well, he's talking about riots. They're worse. They riot when they make the playoffs.
Yes, exactly. All right. You the listeners can decide who won that little argument there. We'll do another argument tomorrow on another topic. Maybe we'll get into politics at some point. No, that we will not get into politics.
No, because you lose. Well, I don't know, but Rob Ford, checkmate.
Rob Ford was. I don't know actually. I think I could delve into and find some pretty crazy Montreal politicians over the years. When did you pay off the big O?
A few years ago.
Yeah. When was it built? 1974?
Well, it was finished after the games, so you can say 77.
So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it might be a tie in terms of municipal politics in the two cities. We'll get into that. But before we end up having to cancel the show, before the Two Solitudes break apart into, what's been threatened for 200 years now. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back, and we're going to get into something a little more serious. USA, Costa Rica.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
St. Clair, new album, you know the rest.
Yes.
I feel like we should be somber here for a moment, although you might want to celebrate the first goal, the winning goal.
4-0. Johan Venegas. It's funny, I can't remember who tweeted this, but yep, World Cup qualifiers, where a Bundesliga wonderkind is getting burned by a French Montreal Impact player.
Yeah, look, I mean, that was a subtopic of the conversation last night was the fact that considering Jurgen Klinsmann, and we're going to get into Klinsmann in a moment here, is so anti-MLS in many ways, or perceived to be anti-MLS. I don't think there's any perception about that. He quite bluntly says that he wants his players not playing in MLS. He wants his players being challenged at a higher level. But yet, basically, Costa Rica, a good part of their spine was built around players that are using Major League Soccer as a resource for themselves to get playing time and to get better. And that underlines something that I've said many times before in this world. And this is what people that want to dismiss the possibility of the Canadian Premier League to continue the trend from the trend of earlier the show here, the theme I meant. You just need playing time. You need to be playing against players. And the level matters to a certain level, but by and large, if you're getting consistent playing time, that's always better than sitting on a bench. It doesn't matter whether that bench is plated in gold or not. You know what I mean? And I think that we saw a bit of that last night with that. That said, though, there's a lot of stuff to talk about, unpack about in this game. 4-0 loss to Costa Rica. The USA is sitting at the bottom of the hex because of goal differential right now with TNT. They also lost 3-1 to Honduras yesterday, which meant that Stephen Hart has now lost 11-2 in his last two games at San Pedro Sula. It was kind of funny. It went quickly on that. At the end, he's shaking Mario Guevara's hand, and they kind of just were having a laugh. And because Guevara probably knows Stephen Hart from his years in Toronto, so I'm sure that the topic came up with the last time. It's a little better than last time, probably is what was said.
It's some improvement.
Yeah, and you kind of could just tell that he just kind of laughed and just shook his head and looked up and said, what are you going to do? Yeah. And now he's had his moment of pleasure on that as well, and that's good for Stephen Hart. But nonetheless, they look a step behind. But it was the worst loss in World Cup qualifying for the U.S. in at least the post-MLS era. Grant Wall called it the worst of all time last night. I'm not sure. Worst in history, he said. I'm not sure where his history starts, but because the U.S. has had some really bad losses before at the World Cup level in the old days, but certainly yesterday wasn't very good. Kevin, quick overall thoughts before we get into the Klinsmann and we talk about some of the polls that I put out.
I'm not that surprised, Duane, by the results. We talked about it last week, and the ramp-up of this weekend was going to be a tough weekend for the United States, and there was a fair probability that they would lose those two games, and it happened. And the way the team was set up, the uncertainties at a few positions with players not necessarily in the greatest form, making their comeback for the team, some players in form and are not there. The decisions actually doesn't make a lot of sense. And if you actually look at the people that do cover this team more closely than we do, the Matt Doyle, the Brian Dunsap, the other bigger names following this club, this team, this selection, you do see a bewilderment, wondering what happened, wondering why was it set up that way? What was the goal to set it up that way? What was the intention behind those roster decisions? And those are it's Klinsmann decisions. So that's where the question mark is right now.
Yeah. Jurgen Klinsmann is absolutely the talking point right now for a couple different reasons. One, he seems like Teflon. He seems like a guy that just can't get fired, that there's nothing he can do in this World Cup cycle that is going to cause the U.S. Soccer Federation to pay out whatever they owe him and move on. And there's a lot of people, a lot of high-profile analysis, including Grant Wall, who called for him to be fired last night, which is one of the more conservative voices when it comes to stuff like that. So when you're getting a guy like Wall coming out to call for his head, then really you've reached a point of no return. But I do think that if you look at the fact that they re-signed him to another cycle before the last cycle was over, that he just gets such blanket levels of support from the USSF, it does put them in a tough situation financially. I mean, they also have the dispute with the women going on, and if they pay Klinsmann a whole bunch of money just to get rid of them, that's not going to look very good when you're getting down to that. And that's, I think, an underspoken factor in him being retained at least through to the end of the year whenever this USWNT dispute gets resolved. They have off till March. That's good and bad. It's good in the sense that there's a long time to figure it out. It's bad in the sense that it's a long time to dwell on it.
It's a long time to be bottom of the hex.
Yeah.
Even if it's because it doesn't move, it's still a long time to be thought as the worst team in CONCACAF so far in the last round of qualification for the Russia in 2018.
Yeah, and look, quickly, that's we'll get into more of that in a minute. And look, I said last night, and for what it's worth, my position on this when it comes to Klinsmann is it's increasingly hard to justify his continued employment. I am not a fire the coach guy. I never have been. I have an incredible amount of patience, more than most when it comes to keeping managers on. I think the stability of maintaining a manager is more important than whatever short-term bounce you might get from firing them, particularly when you're talking about national team coaches. However, when I look at the way that they capitulated in that second half yesterday, I look at the way that they came out confused and bewildered in the first half against Mexico, and I say that's on Klinsmann. And if you're talking about the U.S., I believe the U.S. to be a top 25 team in the world. A top 32 team in the world, certainly, meaning that they should be in every World Cup. If you're talking about a team at that level and getting these two back-to-back results in the World Cup qualifying, I can't think of very many of those top 32 teams in the world that would maintain their coach at that point. Most of them would fire them, especially when you consider that outside of the Copa Centenario last year, that he hasn't had great results. The U.S. is, I think, been in a bit of a downfall in the last 4 or 5 years that has been blinded by some good tournament results, and good tournament results can paper over some stuff for sure. And certainly getting out of the group in the last World Cup was unexpected by me for sure, and that has allowed him a little bit more flack. Getting to the semifinals this past summer in a tournament that has a varying degree of importance depending on who you talk to, it certainly did help underline this perception that the U.S. becomes a good tournament team. But you also have to factor in the fact that they had an historically horrible Gold Cup the last time out. So that maybe puts a little bit of argument into that. And then you add these two results to it, and like I said, there's not many countries in the world where he'd still be employed, right?
Yes, and Mexico would definitely have moved on a long time ago if they were in the same situation with the same level of coaching or result more. Because
He might have
Mexico,
now the Mexico and fired again. But
yeah, well, yes, that's what we have seen with Mexico over the years. But no, and that's one thing that's been mentioned. Is like, what if Mexico was in that position? How would they react? Maybe it's a time that the United States Soccer Federation pull the trigger and start to be a little bit more reactive than passive on that case.
yeah, and look, the window for getting rid of Klinsmann is now. You have a long stretch before the next internationals. You're going to see some openings right now. Bruce Arena is around. I've heard him mention, I think that if you approach Bruce Arena and said, "Do you want to come in and rescue this team one more time?" That would be something that might appeal to him to step aside because, there's a lot of talk in LA and that they need to move younger and they need to change their philosophies, to sort of react to MLS 3.0 a little bit better. And maybe Bruce Arena realizes that he might not be the man to lead that project. He's a man that's more about established players and man management and things like that. And managing the U.S. men's national team might be a good fit for him. It was in the past. It could be again. That's a possibility, but you're going to have to move quickly if that's the way you want to go. Look, let's move to a couple quick things here. I put a couple polls out. One last night, right at the end of the game, or I think it was in the stoppage time when I put it out. The game is mostly blank, and it was either the two options you had was U.S. disaster or Costa Rican statement. And right now, the results, almost 30 or 12 hours later, are 74-26 U.S. disaster. Now, I think that's interesting in the sense that it probably, shows how many of my followers are more American-centric than Central American-centric, because I do think that there is another side to this story, and that's just how good Costa Rica was in the game, how dominant they were, how well they play as a team, how they did everything that the U.S. did poorly, they did well. And I think that we'd be remiss if we didn't take a moment to at least acknowledge that Costa Rica certainly is following up their great World Cup performance in 2014 with an equally impressive World Cup qualifying campaign for 2018, and this team might be for real, and the U.S. might at best be third best team in CONCACAF right now, Kevin.
Costa Rica was impressive in the last two games they played in this round, Duane. They were impressive. It was against TNT, but it was 2-0. But they were more impressive in this game, 4-0 against the U.S. Yohan Venegas, coming out of nowhere, coming out of not playing for the Montreal Impact, comes in with influence on the pitch. He orchestrated the second goal in the first game last Friday as a sub. And this time around, he started the game, and he gave all kinds of trouble to the back line and the defense of the United States. And that was impressive. Joel Campbell, 2-goal. Bolaños, Watson, a lot of players that are MLS veterans or experienced in MLS or are familiar with the United States, literally, in my opinion, made a statement yesterday. But it depends on how you look at it. For me, a Costa Rican success could be at the same time a downfall for the U.S. So I would go 50-50 on your poll.
Yeah, well, the correct answer is both.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But I did say mostly to make people make a choice. But certainly Costa Rica deserves a lot of credit, and most of the attention is going to be on the U.S. though for understandable reasons. The other question I asked this morning, the Sports Podcasting Network Soccer Today question of the day, was where will the USA finish in the Hex? And the options were first or second, third, fourth, or fifth or sixth. Right now, the results, only 3% have suggested that they're going to finish first or second. I think maybe they clicked the wrong button. 47% suggested third, 36% suggested fourth, and 14% are particularly pessimistic this morning and think that they will be automatically eliminated. Kevin, look, now,
it depends, right? Depends if Panama can beat the U.S., then maybe fourth. But for now, if you go with just what we have seen, Mexico and Costa Rica clearly are better than the United States, but they're probably still third in the Hags.
Yeah, and look, okay, so some hashtag math here before we get into some final thoughts on things. I looked back. There's been 5 versions of the Hex, dating back from 1998. So there's been 5 times the Hex been played. 3 of those occasions, 4 of the teams advanced. The other 2 times, it was only 3 teams advancing to the next round. No half spots in the first two editions of the Hacks. Nonetheless, just looking at those key positions of fourth and third, which continue to have another day. Fourth place is not ideal, but you do have another day, and it is against the fifth place team in Asia, so it is a beatable opponent to make that World Cup. So in terms of points that happened there, coming from 98 forward, so, I'll go 98 to 2002 to 2006, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The third place finisher, the automatic finisher, had 14, 17, 16, 16, and 15 points. The fourth place finisher, and again, the first two editions they didn't advance, the next three they did get a half spot, were 12, 14, 13, 16, 11. So that gives you an average of 15.6 points for the third, 13.2. You round them, you're looking at 13 points probably to play another day, and 16 points to advance directly to Russia. What that means in terms of what the U.S. is doing, it's not quite as bleak. If you're an American fan standing on a ledge right now, have a look at that math and think about it for a second. The hardest two games, undoubtedly, two of the three hardest two games, undoubtedly, that they are going to play in this Hacks are done now. I'm going to include the Mexican away as possibly the hardest game they play in the Hacks. So we're talking about the second and third most difficult game. Mexico at home, they lost it. So, a lot of times in the past, they were able to get those 3 points and propel them. This time it didn't happen, but it's still, a game that was going to be very difficult. And Costa Rica away, probably the third most difficult game they were going to play in this Hacks. They've lost it. But what this means, basically, to get to that magic number of 16, with their 8 games left, their 24 points left, is if you get the 4 results that are the easiest in this, Honduras home and away, Trinidad and Tobago home and away, if you get 10 points out of that, which allows you to drop points in Honduras or draw in Honduras, a win at home against Honduras, a sweep of the Trinidad series, you're only looking for 3 points in the remaining games, right? And you're looking for 6 points in the remaining games. Can you get 6 points against Panama home and away, Mexico away, Costa Rica at home? It's hard to think they can. Sure. So to me, they're still in line for third place.
Yeah, no, they're probably exactly, unless a big Panama defeat, and then it slims down the margin of error that they do have, because that's what happens with those 2 losses to start the Hacks is their margin of error has slimmed down to now just being 6 points. So they have 2 losses left that they can afford to, basically, if we go with our hashtag math.
Yeah, well, that's assuming they get the results against Honduras and Trinidad. But again, the talent gap should allow them to get 6 points against TNT. Really, it should. They played them already. They've proven that they can beat them in this cycle. There's really no reason to suggest that they can't get 6 points against TNT. I'm willing to say Honduras is good enough to get up to at least a draw at home against them. But even if they were to lose in San Pedro Sula, they're still in decent shape as long as they handle Panama, and that's going to be their key games. The next 2 games for the U.S. are in March. Well, everyone's in March, but the next 2 games are at home versus Honduras. The location's yet to be determined, and away to Panama. So that's going to be key games. As long as they can turn it around before then, this shouldn't really be that stressful. These are, had they reversed the fixtures and they were 0 points coming out of Honduras to Panama, then yeah, panic, because there's hard games coming up. But because these were 2 of their 3 hardest games that they have out of the hop, it means that the rest of their schedule is probably the weakest in the Hacks. So as long as they can get things turned around in the few months that are available till then, they should be fine. 2 minutes left, and we'll just get some final thoughts each. Look, the most concerning thing to me last night was not so much the scoreline, but the fact that after that second goal went in, they seem to have this shoulder slump. They seem to have this like the fight that the U.S. is famous for. Like, we're getting into intangibles, but that is kind of part of their charm. The whole U.S. spirit stuff, fight to the end. Landon Donovan scoring against Algeria, that stuff wasn't there at all. And that, to me, is the most troubling aspect of this, and that, to me, was the most damning aspect of this for Klinsmann, and why, again, it's increasingly difficult to justify it at all that he's staying on. But I think he's going to. Kevin?
Oh, I agree. The bits and bytes on Soccer Today. You think people are cheating when they just take the signs of other clubs to reveal their new jersey, Dwayne?
If you haven't seen it yet, Atlanta United revealed its own script. They have this very, very spectacular video. It's it's almost like an NBA intro video. If you've gone to an NBA game before, you know what I mean. Like there's lightning and there's pounding of railway tracks, because Atlanta was a railway town back in the day, if you know your history. So that's why that was in there, if you didn't know that. Lots of stuff like that. And then there's this man in black that's there, and he's like this muscle-bound guy, and you can't really see what he looks like. And there's kind of flashes around him, and then finally at the end, he steps out into the light, and there's the jersey. So it was a very epic and spectacular. It probably cost them more money than don't even want to know.
And if you get a salary in a year.
To put that on, but at any rate, that was how they unreeled it. And then it turns out, and the second I saw it, I went, oh, it's AC Milan's red. it's exactly.
A little bit of gold instead of white, but basically that's what it is.
Yeah,
looks good. Looks good with the gold. I'm not gonna lie, it actually looks good. But
yeah, the shoulder striping is gold instead of white. The black stripes are a little thicker than they would be on the AC Milan strip, but it is absolutely. If anyone saw it in the street in a quick glance, they'd assume it was an AC Milan jersey. And look, on one hand, that doesn't matter. There's only so many ways to design a soccer strip, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen the worst one in the 90s, where it seemed like Picasso designed a few kits. But no, well, it's kind of it's a template, and they've been put to the Atlanta United colors.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see MLS do something. If you remember the old, sorry, the name's escaping now, but the box ones where you have the 4 different boxes with 4 colors, red, kind of like that. If you can visualize what I'm saying here, or there's not a lot of vertical stripes in there. The Galaxy have had them in the past. I kind of like the vertical stripe a little bit. You don't see that. It's on the sash.
True. We don't have a zebra team. We don't have a referee, North American referee team like Juve or others.
Yeah, there's no black and white out there yet for in terms of color scheme, but when you have red and black, you should have stuck. Checkerboards, not many checkerboards out there in MLS right now. There's ways you can be a little bit more original that are still keeping in the traditional templates of soccer jerseys without just basically taking AC Milan's kit and making the black stripes thinner. But alas, it is what it is. That's what their jerseys are for, I guess. I'm sitting in a city where, our jersey's just red. It's literally just red. That's kind of the TFC jersey. They'll change tiny little the stripings on the shoulders, or they'll make an image of a maple leaf that you kind of squint at and look like.
Yeah, but the maple leaf kind of looked like it was always wet, so it looked like the wet spot all the time on the jersey. Yeah. Kind of glad they went away with it. Yeah.
Well, I actually like the Impact jerseys for the record, but they're essentially Inter.
Yeah, they're the plan. They're Inter. So we have AC and Inter.
Yeah, exactly. So gonna have the Milan Derby as to play with their traditional strips. So we'll see what Atlanta does. But more importantly, I think the other news coming out of Atlanta is that they're being linked to Carlos Tevez, and that's a name that resonates with me and United fans even. So they got a lot of people going on with Tevez. Of course, he crossed the great Manchester divide. That I don't know. I always said, I remember saying back 3-4 years ago that Tevez, when I watched him all the time, would be a great MLS DP because of the way he played. He played with a certain level of intensity and physicality that's really required in Major League Soccer. But he's been kind of out of sight, out of mind in Argentina for the last couple of years. I don't know. Thoughts on Tevez as a DP in Atlanta, Kevin?
I think he could be very successful in Major League Soccer. You mentioned the way he plays, and even the way he plays now in Argentina. We've seen players coming from Argentina, the likes of Nacho Piatti, being very successful in Major League Soccer. Carlos Tevez's level that he plays now will be very conducive to how he could potentially play for Major League Soccer Atlanta United. So no, I think it's the kind of DP or player, because maybe with Tam and Gam, it's not even a DP. Maybe it's at a little lower level with the amount of Tam and Gam you can apply to him. We'll see that when that bridge is crossed. But could be the type of player that is very successful in Major League Soccer with the type of player that he is, the tempo as which he plays. So yeah, that would be very, very fascinating to me.
Yeah, look, I mean, the question with Tevez has always been sort of, he's a simple man. We'll say that, and if he's not happy, he tends to pout, and when he's pouting, he tends to just disappear. But when he's happy, he is a tremendous footballer that can score buckets of goals, and that's what you want in a DP. He will be 33 at the start of the next Major League Soccer season. That's not it's not Frank Lampard old. It's not Sebastian Giovinco young, but it certainly is a player that I think, when you look at both Giovinco, I'm not just saying that because he's in Toronto and I'm in Toronto. I'm saying that because both of them are at Juve at the same time, and Tevez is better than him. So if you think about it that way and you add a few years to it, yeah, there's a lot of potential to it if he's willing to come up. And I mean, the reason his connection is through the coach and their Argentine thing. They named all their staff too the other day. And it's basically not a lot of Major League Soccer experience in the staff. So
I think there's 3 that are Major League Soccer experience. The rest is experience with Martino himself and other teams. Yeah.
Yeah, so this makes sense. So it seems like that if Orlando is going to be the team with Brazilian influence within Major League Soccer, that Atlanta is going to be the team with Argentine influence in Major League Soccer. And, maybe they're setting themselves up for the ultimate Argentine player in a few years.
Whoa.
Can he get it done on a hot Tuesday in Houston? Anyway,
we'll start by can he get it done in England, and then maybe can he get it done somewhere else.
Yeah, would you say certainly? I mean, Argentina had a great day yesterday. And Messi with that free kick goal. Did you see the free kick goal miss? Wow.
Yeah, it's coming up on the highlights. But they did have a tougher week last week when they lost to Brazil 3-0.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. They also they're having a feud with the media. They're refusing to talk to the media now. Anyway, it's always interesting down in Argentina. But certainly to get back to Tevez, as I said, I have been saying for years that he, in many ways, is the perfect DP. I would have liked him a couple of years ago, but I don't think 33 is so old that you're looking at him as quote-unquote retirement league stuff. I think when you get plus 35, you're getting into that. So if Tevez can come, use his star power and still skills, if fading, but still there, to launch Atlanta, then it could be a very interesting and good signing for them, Kevin.
Absolutely, it will be interesting. We do have as well Tim Howard officially out. Can Zach McMath get the job done? We know he can, because when he stopped playing for the club because of Tim Howard's arrival, they had 2 points per game average as a team. So can he rekindle that magic that he did do in the early part of the season?
Yeah, it's a team that's based on the back line more than their keeper, I think, which is why we always question Howard to begin with. We had this conversation a great deal earlier this week. We were talking about the injury, but now that we know he is out they're saying it for 4 months. But I don't know. The other question on the side of this that I have with Howard is whether this is the beginning of the end for him. He's already made that conscientious decision to come back to Major League Soccer. His skills were already in decline in Everton, which is why he wasn't seeing the pitch when he left at the end, and why Everton fans, although they loved him for what he did for them for many years, were happy to see him go by the end. He had a great game in that penalty shootout, although some of the shots weren't particularly well taken either, but nonetheless, his mere presence out there, I think, helped force those shots to be poorly taken. But, injuries at that age, when you get near the end, they can start to spell the end. So maybe we're seeing the beginning of the end for one of the U.S.'s greatest players ever. It's hard to rank the greatest players with the keepers, but certainly among
one of the greatest keepers they ever had. Let's put it that way. If not the greatest keepers ever had.
A lot of great keepers. With Guzan, we saw yesterday, who still got it, even coming off the bench, not playing a lot. He was still able to keep the U.S. in that game in the first half last night. So there's a great tradition there, and I don't think it's going to really affect the national team pool, because I do believe that they have enough going on there. But it could be, I think the most complicated thing for Colorado, as I said the other day, is if it is the end, what do they do with the salary? What do they do with the DP slot? Are they able to overcome that situation moving forward, Kevin? Any final thoughts on the day, on the CIS, on U.S. Costa Rica, anything whatsoever before we say goodbye until tomorrow?
No, just keep an eye on the Sports Podcast Network. A few shows coming later today, and we're one step closer to November 22nd.
Grr.
And until tomorrow, 11 a.m., have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.